I stumbled back, shocked by the venom in his voice. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Charles laughed, a harsh, mean sound. "Don't play dumb, Luna. We saw your little social media post showing off your new apartment, posing with Grandma. You think we can't figure it out? It hit me what they were accusing me of. You think Grandma bought us this apartment? We know she did." Scott spat. "You've been playing the poor, neglected child for years, worming your way into her good graces. Now you've tricked her into making you the sole heir." Anger surged through me, and I stood taller. "You have no idea what you're talking about. John and I bought this apartment with our own money. Money we worked hard for." Charles sneered, his eyes darting around the room. "Right, sure you did. Where's the old bat, anyway? Hiding her so we can't talk some sense into her. She should be in a cemetery by now. I can't wait for her to kick the bucket so I can sell her house and live it up." The room went deadly silent. For a second, I thought I had imagined those awful words. Then a quiet voice came from the doorway of the guest room. "So this is how you really feel about." All heads turned to see Grandma Julie standing there, her face a mix of shock and disappointment. The color drained from Scott and Charles's faces as they realized she had heard everything. "Grandma," Scott stammered, "we didn't mean." Julie raised her hand, stopping him. "I've heard enough," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Now I understand who truly values me and who sees me as just a meal ticket." Her words gave me the strength to speak. "I think you both need to leave now." For a moment, it looked like they might argue, but one look at Grandma's hurt yet resolute face made them back down. They slumped toward the door, muttering weak excuses. The aftermath of that evening hit like a storm. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, filled with calls and messages. Each one reminded me of the mess that had blown up. Mom's name flashed on the screen for what felt like the 100th time, and against my better judgment, I considered answering. I answered the call. "Luna." Mom's voice was sharp, not sounding like a mother at all. "You need to fix this. Your grandmother is furious with the boys. You need to smooth things over and tell her it was all a misunderstanding." I let out a bitter laugh. "A misunderstanding?" They broke into my home and said they couldn't wait for her to die so they could sell her house. How is that a misunderstanding? They didn't mean it. Dad jumped in, clearly on speakerphone. "You know how the boys can be. They were just upset." "What are you upset about?" I put myself to the test. "John and I used our own funds to purchase an apartment. I'm loved by my grandmother." Mom's voice became funny yet endearing. "We understand that you've always felt excluded, sweetie, but you should consider what's best for the family. That inheritance is rightfully your brother's. Avoid becoming self-centered." A part of me broke. Years of anguish and fury finally broke out. Self-centered. After years of favoritism, you're labeling me selfish, dismissing my accomplishments, and acting as though John and I don't matter. Have you the audacity to demand that I give up an inheritance that I never asked for now? "Luna." Dad started, but I interrupted him. "No, I finished. I'm beyond the manipulation, the guilt trips, and everything else. Please don't text, phone, or knock on my door. We're done." I blocked their phones and Scott and Charles's throughout the course of the following few days. I had to chop out something rotten-like painfully, but it was an essential step toward my healing. There was a distinct kind of warmth surrounding me as the dust settled. Grandma Julie became even more involved in our lives after realizing the dynamics of the family, which she had long assumed. Nicole, who had gotten in touch following the chaos of the wedding, started coming often. "I have always known you are unique, Luna," she replied, giving me a strong embrace. "I apologize for not speaking up for you sooner." Supporting responses came from other relatives, including uncles, distant aunts, and cousins who had witnessed my family's years of mistreatment of me. It was as though a curtain had been withdrawn, making room for genuine connections to blossom where there had only been duty. I was surrounded by the pure affection of John's family, bless them. His parents made a special effort to make me feel loved, even though they had watched helplessly while my own family tore me apart. John and I devoted all of our energy to furnishing our new flat. Every item of furniture and every picture hanging on the wall represented the kind of life we were creating together, one based on love, respect, and support for one another. "Oh, I'm not sure that's a good idea," she interrupted me abruptly. "I'll be incredibly busy, and so will your father. The boys are receiving research paper assistance from us. You know what I mean." My chest began to fill with that familiar mixture of hurt and rage as soon as I hung up the phone. However, something was different this time around, a little flicker of defiance and resolve. I glanced around my little dorm room, which consisted mostly of a partially completed repair job and a stack of art books on my desk. I had created this universe on my own, in spite of everything. This was my world now. I whispered, "Forget them," to the empty room. I don't need their approval. However, deep down I knew that wasn't true even while I was saying it. A tiny part of me hoped that my parents would eventually realize me for who I truly was and still wanted them to acknowledge me. My family didn't pay much attention to my graduation when it happened. We had a brief meal at a chain restaurant to commemorate my big day. "So Luna, what's next?" Dad questioned, hardly taking his eyes from his menu. I stood up straight and attempted to project confidence. "I actually got a job offer from a museum in Los Angeles." Dad scowled. "I'm not sure, Luna. The cost of living in Los Angeles is high. What is the salary for this position?" I felt my face get hot as I mumbled the not-so-great starting salary. The disappointment on their faces was hard to miss. The rest of the dinner was a blur of subtle criticism and more comparisons to Scott and Charles's academic success. As we were leaving the restaurant, Grandma Julie pulled me aside. "Don't let them dim your light, my dear," she whispered, slipping another small envelope into my hand. "Go to Los Angeles and chase your dreams." Inside the envelope was a check, just enough to cover my first month's rent in the city. I hugged her tightly, trying not to cry. The next few years were a whirlwind. I threw myself into my work, slowly making a name for myself in the art restoration world. During this time, I met John. He was a struggling graphic designer with a kind smile and an infectious passion for his work. We clicked instantly over our shared love of art and our experiences as underdogs in our fields. After dating for a while, I decided it was time for John to meet my family. From the moment we sat down, it was clear my parents had other plans. They fired question after question at John, each one more intense than the last. "So John," Dad began, trying to sound casual but failing, "what are your long-term career prospects?" John shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, I'm building up my client base. It takes time, but I'm making progress." Mom jumped in. "And your income. Is it enough to support a family?" My face flushed with embarrassment. "Mom, that's not." But John squeezed my hand under the table. "It's okay, Luna," he said calmly. "I'm not where I want to be financially yet, Dr. James, but I'm working hard to get there." The interrogation continued throughout dinner, and with each question, it was clear my parents weren't convinced. I could see John's confidence dropping and my own anger rising. As we were leaving, Mom pulled me aside. "Luna, honey, I know you think you care about this boy, but you need to be realistic. You've already picked a tough career path. Don't make it harder by being with someone who has no future." "Mom," I whispered, shocked at how blunt she was. Dad stepped in too. "Your mother's right, Luna. You need to think about your future. John seems nice, but is he really good enough for you? You could do so much better." I stood there speechless as all the frustration I had bottled up for years nearly boiled over. How dare they judge John? How dare they dismiss my choices once again? As John and I started planning our wedding, reality hit us hard. Our savings were pretty small, barely enough for a simple ceremony. One night, after staring at budget spreadsheets for hours, I decided to ask my parents for help. "Mom, Dad," I began cautiously during our weekly call, "John and I have set a date for the wedding. We're trying to keep costs low, but I was wondering if you might want to help out a little, maybe even just with the planning." The silence on the other end was long and uncomfortable. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice cold. "Luna, you're an adult now. If you've chosen to marry this person, you need to handle the consequences yourself." I hung up, feeling awful, but not really surprised. Once again, Grandma Julie stepped in to save the day. When I told her about the situation, she didn't hesitate. "My dear," she said warmly over the phone, "I may not be able to give you the wedding of your dreams, but I want to help make your day special." She sent some money, and while it wasn't much, it made a big difference in our plans. The wedding day came, and I had a mix of excitement and nerves. The community center we rented was simple but looked lovely, decorated with wildflowers and fairy lights. Our close friends helped with everything from the decorations to the homemade cake. As I walked down the makeshift aisle, John's face lit up with a smile that made all the struggles worth it. For a moment, I forgot about the money issues and my family's negativity, and I just soaked in the love in his eyes. That bubble burst when I saw my family. Mom and Dad sat stiffly in the front row, looking bored and unimpressed. I overheard Mom whispering to Dad about how tacky the decorations were and how cheap the food seemed. Scott and Charles were even worse, standing in the corner, laughing, and glued to their phones. I tried my best to ignore them, focusing on our vows and the kind, supportive faces of our friends. It wasn't until the next day that I realized how truly cruel they could be. When I woke up, my phone was blowing up with notifications. Scott and Charles had posted a bunch of embarrassing photos from the wedding on social media. "Congrats to our big sis on her special day." Read one caption under a blurry picture of John and me cutting our homemade cake. Another post had a sarcastic caption, "Nothing says true love like a dollar store wedding," next to a picture of our decorations. One post showed our buffet table beside a photo of a fancy meal from a high-end restaurant with a caption, "Luna's wedding versus our average Thursday lunch. Guess which is which." The comments were brutal. Some relatives were horrified by Scott and Charles's behavior. Aunt Nicole wrote, "This is completely unacceptable. You should be ashamed of yourselves." But others found it funny. Our cousin Mark commented, "Savage but true." That wedding looked like a homeless convention. Reading through the comments made me feel sick, but what hurt the most was seeing my parents' responses. Instead of scolding their sons, they were encouraging them. Mom had commented, "Boys will be boys. It's just a bit of harmless fun." I didn't call them or demand an apology. I just decided to cut them out of my life for a while. 5 months after the wedding, it was time for the annual James family reunion. Even though I had my doubts, John thought we should go, hoping it might be a chance to clear the air. We couldn't have been more wrong. The tension was so thick you could feel it. I kept it together for the first hour, making polite conversation and avoiding my immediate family as much as possible. But then I overheard Scott bragging about his latest luxury vacation, paid for by our parents, of course. Something inside me snapped. "Must be nice," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. To have Mom and Dad pay for your entire life. The room went silent. Scott stared at me, speechless. What's that supposed to mean? He finally asked. You know exactly what it means, I replied, all the frustration I had buried for years boiling over. You and Charles get everything handed to you on a silver platter, while I've had to fight for every bit of recognition or support. Mom stepped forward, her face red with anger. Now, Luna, you're being ridiculous. We've always treated you kids equally. I let out a bitter laugh. Equal? Are you serious? Let's talk about equal, I said, counting on my fingers. Private school tuition for the boys, public school for me. Brand new cars for their 17th birthdays, nothing for mine, and the grand finale. $700,000 for their Ivy League educations, while I had to scrape by on scholarships and loans. The room was so silent you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was staring, watching our family's dirty laundry being aired out in front of everyone. Mom's voice was cold when she finally spoke. If you're so obsessed with money, Luna, maybe you should have married someone rich instead of your poor husband. Her words hit me like a slap. John, who had been quietly supporting me the whole time, stiffened beside me. How dare you, I whispered, feeling tears in my eyes. John is worth 10 of you. He loves me for who I am, not for how I can make him look at his country club friends. The reunion spiraled into chaos. Everyone started yelling, dragging up old grudges, years of anger spilling out. In the middle of it all, a strong voice rose above the noise. Enough. Everyone turned to see Grandma Julie standing up. Her normally kind face looked stern and angry. I've watched this family fall apart for years, and I won't stand for it anymore, she said firmly. Isabella, Adam, your treatment of Luna has been shameful. She added, turning to Scott and Charles, your cruelty toward your sister is unforgivable. The room went silent again, but Mom never wanted to back down. Mother, you don't understand. Luna has always been difficult, always causing problems. No, Isabella, Grandma interrupted. The only problem here is your obvious favoritism and your refusal to see the damage you've done. I looked around at the shocked faces of my relatives, at Grandma standing tall, and at my parents' anger and my brother's smug expressions. At that moment, something inside me broke. But then it came back together, stronger. I'm done, I said quietly but firmly. I'm done trying to get your approval. Done being part of this toxic family. John and I are leaving, and don't bother trying to contact us. The months that followed were tough, but John was my rock through it all. He held me when the sadness hit, celebrated the little victories, and never once made me feel bad for the family drama I'd brought into our lives. Life has a strange way of surprising you when you least expect it. It all started with a phone call. John had been working tirelessly for weeks, pouring everything he had into a pitch for a major client. The call came on a sunny Thursday morning. I could tell from the look on John's face that something big had just happened. We got it, he whispered, barely able to speak. Luna, we got the contract. The next few months were a whirlwind. John's small design firm blew up overnight, and that big client opened doors we never thought we'd see. Suddenly, we weren't just getting by anymore. We were doing really well. But with all that success came an unexpected problem. My phone started lighting up with notifications, friend requests from family members I had blocked long ago, messages from distant relatives who suddenly wanted to catch up, and then the call. I had been dreading Luna. Sweetheart, my mom's sugary sweet voice came through the line. We heard the wonderful news about John's business. We always knew you two would make it. The calls kept coming. My father chimed in, saying how proud they were and how they'd always believed in us. I sat there, stunned and getting angrier with every lie. We'd love to see you. Mom chirped. Maybe we could have dinner and celebrate your success as a family. That snapped me out of it. As a family. I repeated, my voice hard. We haven't been a family for a long time, and that's not going to change just because our bank account has. I stuck to my decision. When my parents showed up at our door unexpectedly, I didn't let them in. When they sent expensive gifts, I sent them back unopened. Instead, John and I focused on building the life we had always dreamed of. We worked hard, saved wisely, and soon enough, we were signing papers for a beautiful apartment right in the middle of the city. Excited to share our happiness, I posted a photo on social media. It was a simple shot of John and me holding the keys, standing in front of our new home. Next to it was a picture from our most recent visit with Grandma Julie, her proud smile shining for the camera. I captioned it, "New beginnings and old love. Grateful for those who've been there through it all." As I hit post, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was my family now. John, Grandma Julie, and the friends who had stuck with us through thick and thin. We had built this life ourselves, despite all the challenges and the people who said we couldn't do it. The soft evening light poured through the windows of our new apartment as I worked in the kitchen, getting dinner ready for John and Grandma Julie. It was our first real family dinner in the new place, and I wanted everything to be perfect. Suddenly, there was a loud, aggressive pounding on the front door that shattered the peace. "Luna, open up. We know you're in there." My blood ran cold. I recognized those voices anywhere. Scott and Charles. Before I could react, the door burst open, and my brothers stormed in, their faces twisted with anger. I barely had time to see John jump to his feet before Scott was in my face, jabbing his finger at my chest. "You manipulative little," he snarled. "We always knew you were playing a long game, but this is low even for you." As they say, I've always been the black sheep in my family, the odd one out. Luna James is my name. Now that I'm 32, I can honestly say that I've never truly fit in. Growing up, I was the eldest child of two physicians, Adam James and Isabella. Even though my parents were well known, I never truly benefited from any of their success. Scott and Charles, my younger twin brothers, received all the attention and benefits. It seemed as though I vanished from my parents' sight the minute those two were born. As we grew older, it became worse and more evident. At first, it was small things like receiving a larger piece of cake or better toys. I will always remember my 12th birthday. I'd been teasing for a long time about this painting set I spotted in a store display. It was a basic set with some good colors and brushes, nothing spectacular. I couldn't wait to open my one present when my birthday finally arrived, but what was inside? A workbook for maths. The favoritism was staring me in the face by the time I reached my teenage years. The boys' desires always determined our family's travel plans. We would head to the slopes if Scott wanted to go skiing. Charles would head directly to the beach if he became a surfer. All of my suggestions were rejected or disregarded. Next was the entire college admission process, which is still a sensitive topic. I became enamored with art restoration when I was 18. I asked the workers at the local museum a million questions about how they restored antique artwork for hours on end. My mother acted as though I had stated I wanted to join the circus and flee when I revealed that I was studying art restoration in college. "Art restoration?" she asked, chuckling. "Luna, be serious, that's not a real job." "Yeah, Luna, why don't you do something useful like becoming a doctor?" A smug grinding Scott even added in. I had never seen my parents look at me so proudly as they did when Scott said that. My family wasn't supportive of me, but I was determined to pursue my love. Upon receiving my college admission letters, I was overjoyed to discover that I had won an art restoration scholarship. I hurried into the kitchen and virtually cried out, "Mom, Dad," as I waved the letter around. I was awarded a scholarship. My mother blinked briefly away from her medical magazine. She responded, "That's nice, honey." Did you hear the boys got perfect scores on their SATs? It seemed like a universe away from the day the twins departed, the day I went for college. After 3 years, I prepared to board the bus for my unremarkable state school by packing my used laptop and clothing from a thrift store. My parents didn't even offer to drive me to the bus station since they were too preoccupied with their jobs. However, my Grandma Julie was the one person who never failed to accept me for who I was. That day, she showed there, and she drew me aside right before I was going to leave. She whispered, "Luna, sweetie," and placed a little package in my palm. "I'm so happy for you. Never lose sight of that." The mail contained a check. While it wasn't enough to completely transform my life, it was enough to ease the transition. The fact that she noticed me was more important than the money. That was crucial. For me, college was a somewhat uneventful experience. On the one hand, I was relieved of the constant comparison to Scott and Charles. I didn't have to compete with anyone for attention, so I could concentrate on my schoolwork. However, finances were tight, really tight. With my part-time work and scholarship, I was barely making ends meet. During family conversations and social media, I would learn about my brother's exciting adventures in the meantime. Our parents would undoubtedly finance our luxury frat parties, wild spring break excursions, internships at large hospitals, and other wonderful activities. I immersed myself in my studies as time went on. Art restoration evolved from a profession to a joyful place for me to escape to. Restoring ancient, neglected items to their former glory and exposing their hidden potential behind ages of wear and tear was incredibly fulfilling. I was able to secure an internship at a modest but reputable museum during my senior year. Although the labor was primarily cleaning and arranging, it was a start in the right direction. I was ecstatic. My mom's reaction when I called to tell her the wonderful news was precisely what I had anticipated, barely interested. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she murmured, her voice trailing off. "Have you heard of Scott's study work? It will appear in a significant medical publication." I suppressed a sigh. "That's fantastic, Mother. Hey, I was considering spending a weekend at home shortly. Perhaps we could."